All right. Good morning, everybody. It's your boy D Mac. Yeah, I said it. Good morning. Top of the day to you. If you're up this early and you're getting ready to start your day, start your meditation, prayer, or start getting ready to go to work, I just want to drop this little nugget in your spirit because it was in mine whenever I woke up this morning. And this right here just might open up a Pandora's box. So I'm going to use this video right here as a setup for a conversation that I want to have later on with some other people. And I'm going to try to get some other people onto the panel to discuss this topic with me further in depth. And so I'm just going to use probably about the next 10 or 15 minutes to set up this whole entire topic for everybody. And this is a relationship dynamic that is never discussed in its proper context, I should say. And that relationship that I'm talking about, as you see in the title, is the Black woman's reverence for the Black pastor. And this is something that is a unspoken truth all around the United States. The reverence that the Black pastor gets in the Black household and the Black community is unparalleled. No, it's not unparalleled. It's only paralleled by the reverence for the white male. Now, I may get some pushback on this from some people, and I may get some agreements from people, but that's not the point of this. The point of this is to open up the floor for us to be able to talk about it and really examine this and really, get some understanding in this relationship dynamic and see the pros and the cons of it and just be honest about it so that we can deal with these things, because the more we try to not talk about it and whisper in the dark places about it, the more taboo it becomes. And just we don't have time for that anymore as a people. We have to be out and open and transparent, and so we have to discuss these tough things. And so I'm going to talk about it. Yeah, I said it. So here we go. Now, in the whole slavery age that we went to, and I'll start at 16, 19, because that's basically when we started coming over here. I'll use that term, coming over here. Um, so the first black man or black person to really have any influence was the black woman, actually. Because what the slave master understood was that the black woman was the key to them having a long line of, just basically an assembly line of slaves coming through that black woman's womb. And so the black woman had the first initial position of influence within the whole slave system and the slave class system, because they had different classes of slaves, right? They had the house Negro, then you had the field Negro, you had the mammy, and you know what I'm saying? And these were different classes, and this was done systemically to separate and to divide. And so the first initial person to really have influence within the black community during those slavery times was the black woman. And she was used to rear the children. She was used for many, many different things that the slave master wanted. But the most important thing that she was used for was teaching the children to have reverence for the master and the overseers But that's about as far as it went. Now they would teach them to have reverence for their father, but not over that overseer or that slave master, because of the process that they would do called buck breaking, where they would take all of the slaves outside and they would get the biggest, strongest men, slaves, and they would beat them within an inch of their lives. And this would strike so much fear into that woman, that mother, that grandmother, that sister, that she would do almost anything to deter her children from growing up to have a rebellious spirit against the slave master and the overseers and such. And so she will make sure that she instills in those children to do any and everything that the slave master says and be totally submissive and passive. And this was a part of the systemic process to further deepen the reigns that they had over the slaves as far as control of their mind, body, and soul. And so, through this influence and through this control, they were able to keep rebellions down, but only for so long, because you had the men who would have enough. They would get tired of seeing their wives being used as belly warmers. They would get tired of seeing their daughters being taken off in the bushes and just done savagely. They were tired of seeing their sons and daughters being snatched away from them and sold, and their wives often snatched away. And a man can only take so much until he snaps and he says, this life is not worth living. And so rebellion started to rise up because of the animalistic savagery that was exhibited by the slave masters and these overseers on these plantations. And so now you have a man or a group of men who are ready to rebel and uprise and all of these things. And so the slave master had to figure out, I've got to figure out a way to regain control over these people, because the women are not getting it done anymore because of the things that we're doing to these women in front of their men. It's, I don't understand the logic in thinking that you can just do this woman this way and do her that way and do her that way and think that you're going to keep her in that grasp through fear. Some people are going to overcome that fear because they're going to have so much hatred and resentment built up, and it will overshadow that fear at some point. And they never factored that into the treatment and the way that they acted towards their slaves. And so after a while, that fear factor began to wear down, and we began to see more uprising and more rebellions from the slaves. And so the slave master said, I have to do something to get this under control. We've got to introduce them to our God, and we've got to introduce the mindset of being passive and surrendering and being a lamb and just being so soft and docile and just laying down and giving over. We've got to drill this into their minds now in order to get control of the masses, because religion has always been used to control the masses. And so, like, okay, well, we've got to get a black preacher, but it can be the only slave that can read. He's the only slave that can read, and he's got to do every single one of his messages before us, or we'll go sit in on his service to make sure that he's not deviating from the message that we've authorized for him to preach to the people and to get these men back under control. These were our first gatekeepers, y'all. These were the first black boule. And please, by all means, this is not an attack on black pastors. I'm just reading you history. I'm bringing the history together to bring together this point of this preface that I'm trying to put forth for a later discussion. And so the black pastor became that fill in for influencing the black slave community over the black woman now. And so the black pastor would come in and he would preach the message and he would be that um what's the word I'm looking for? He would be that example of what God is. He would be that example of what Jesus is to the slaves who have now been forced to adopt Christianity if that was not their religion already, because Christianity was in the African continent far before Europeans came to the African continent. It was not Jesus though. It was Yeshua. They probably understood the name Yeshua and was more familiar with that than they were with the name Jesus when the Europeans came and introduced their version of Christianity to the Africans. And there were some African groups who by then who had already accepted Christianity. And one of those were the Tigrayan people in Ethiopia, which Ethiopia was so much larger than what it is now. And basically a majority of Africa at one time was considered Ethiopia. And so that's for a later discussion, but I'm saying that to just say that, you know, Ethiopia was the centerpiece for our people. And so coming back to where we are now, we've had a situation to where the black pastor was placed in that position of high authority. He's a man who was considered very educated because he knew how to read. He was a man with charisma because he knew how to get up and entertain the people, and that's what they wanted to put most of the focus on, the entertaining of the people, the hooping and the hollering and the jumping around and stuff like that was part of the entertainment portion of, you know, that process of, I guess I'll say, brainwashing. There's no nice way to say it, because that's what they were doing. They were conditioning the minds of the black slave community to be docile, to be passive, and to always surrender to the master. This was always the message every Sunday. It might be given in a different way, but it was in there. It was always the same, never deviated away from it. And so the only man outside of the white man who got respect from the black woman was the black preacher. That's where all of this was going. And I was saying everything I said to tie it into this, but the only black man who received respect from the black woman was the black pastor. And for the reasons that I just stated. And they were someone that a black woman would always try to model their sons after. They were men that black women would always try to marry their daughters to, or either try to pursue themselves if they were around that same age and they were both single. You know, because that was the only image of a strong black man that the black community had and that the black community seen and respected, because the house Negro and the field Negro, that was a part of the division process that separated them. So the house Negro and the field Negro were always having a wedge between, well, I ain't gonna say always, but a majority of the time they would have a wedge between them because of that uh, classism that was placed in between them. And so, the preacher maintained the respect of the black community, and all the way up to this day, it is still like that. And it's to like the black pastor has been placed in such a high regard and such a high place of reverence in the hearts and minds of black women that their husbands often come second to the pastor. And this is not to say that their husbands are lesser men or their husbands are not as successful or anything like that. But it's just that mindset that has always been in the black community of the reverence and the regard that has been given to the black pastor. And oftentimes that black pastor will get, um, his word will supersede everybody else's in the mind of the black woman. And, sometimes that's a good thing if that man is indeed in line with the word of God and in position. But it can also be a bad thing when that man is out of position and using the word to manipulate and get what he wants out of people. And so this is why I wanted to really unpack this a little bit in detail so that when I come on later with possibly, hopefully, my guests, we can really dig deep into this thing and really, really talk about some things that the black community likes to turn a blind eye to. And we can't do it anymore. We don't have any time for people who playing with God. We don't have any more time for people who are playing with the community. We need people who are serious and people who really have a heart and a mind to do the work. Because when you have a heart and a mind to do the work, then there's not going to be all that strife. There's not going to be people worrying about who's getting acknowledged for doing something, because we understand individually and collectively that, look, this needs to be done. It doesn't matter who does it. It doesn't matter who gets some acknowledgement for it. It just needs to be done. And so do it. And so the timeout for having this division amongst us as a people has to stop now. And that only can stop by us talking about the things that we've refused to address throughout our entire stay here. And so we're going to talk about the relationship between the black woman and the black pastor. And like I said before, it can be beneficial and great. It can be that father that she never had, because like God said, I'll be the father to the fatherless, I'll be the mother to the motherless, I'll be the brother to the brotherless. And so in a lot of instances, when you have the black pastor who's standing upright and who's walking upright before the precepts of God and not trying to have any ulterior motives, then he's going to be seen as a father figure in the lives of a lot of these fatherless young ladies who need that positive male role model in their life, who needs that positive authority, who's going to give them structure and who's going to have genuine love for them with no strings attached. But then on the flip side, you're going to have those men in those positions who begins to feel themselves because of the they can't handle the position that they're in, because with power comes responsibility. And if there's anything in them that they're holding on to and they're still battling with, those things are going to be magnified when they're placed in a position like that. And so you have a lot of pastors who are falling to the wayside because they're getting distracted and they're getting caught up in the relationships that they are having with the parishioners, I should say. Flattery is one of the most deadly things. And anyone who is in any type of religious organization and you're in a position of leadership, you know exactly what I'm saying and you understand completely. Being in a position of leadership is very dangerous because you have to deal with so much. You have to encounter so much dealing with people. And anytime you reach out and you help somebody and you're there for somebody and you're there in their life, they feel a certain appreciation for you. And oftentimes, the way that they've been brought up in the life that they've had, the only way that they've been able to show affection has been through a sexual nature. And so when you're in a position of leadership or authority in any type of spiritual setting or something like that, and you're helping people, you have to be very, very careful when you counsel because people will gain an attachment to you. And oftentimes, if they're of the opposite sex, then they're going to feel obligated to sleep with you because that's the only way that they know how to show appreciation and affirmation to another person that they appreciate. And so you have to be able to, one, recognize when a person is starting to cross that boundary from appreciation to flirting and inappropriate stuff like that. And you have to be able to know how to wisely knock that down. You got to be able to speak against that. You got to be able to cut that down right there in the beginning and let them understand that, look, this feeling that you're feeling is not you wanting to have sex with me. This feeling that you're feeling is gratitude for somebody reaching out and touching you in a way that, you know, that nobody's been able to do in a long time. And that's touching your spirit, not a physical touch. And so when you explain that to, you have to be able to have the wisdom and the tact to be able to explain it in a way to where they don't feel like too hurt or embarrassed or anything like that. It's a very delicate place to be in. But as someone who operates in the gift of counseling, then these are things that you're going to encounter. And this is something that the Black pastor encounters on a regular basis. And that's why they are under such attack on a sexual level. It's not because they're just the sexiest guys in the world or the sexiest women in the world. It's because of what people experience from being in this person's life and what this person is bringing to this new child in Christ's life. So getting caught up in that emotional roller coaster is very, very dangerous. And the Black woman's reverence for the Black pastor hinges solely on, the intentions of that pastor. Because already when they're a little child, just think about it. As a little girl, most little Black girls who grow up in the community and they got a grandma or somebody like that to go to church, grandma taking you to church from the time you're a little baby, and you always see the black pastor in high regard. So as that young girl grows up and she gets older, she still sees that pastor in high regard, and she's going to teach that same thing to her daughters, and so forth and so on. And so that black pastor has always had a long-standing reputation and a already programmed sense of influence from the black preacher in her life. And so she's trusting him off the top, no questions asked, until, something happens. And now she's not only hurt, she's confused, she's trying to think that she do something. There's so many different feelings going on, and there's so much damage that's done by men in those positions who have these sexual problems that they're not strong enough to handle. And so this is the dark and the ugly side of the that relationship between the black woman and the black pastor. And so I just wanted to use this time to set this up. And later on, I want to get some people on here with me to discuss this further in depth. And I hope I really set it up pretty decent. I know I stumbled and fumbled through it a little bit, but it's just so much stuff that was in my mind when I woke up, and to try to push it all out, man, it gets a little frustrating sometimes. But I hope I did it justice. And if I didn't, it don't matter, because we're gonna come back and clear everything up later on. So, this is your boy D Mac, man. I thank you for checking in with your boy. I thank you for um all that you do for my channel. The new subscribers coming in, everything, all of the comments, all of it, man. I appreciate y'all so much. I do want to give a shout out to my boy Phonics, and that's over there on his show. And so that's one of the people that I was speaking about that I'm trying to get on today. Hopefully, Phonics can come on and promote his platform, definitely. And we'll just chop it up and do some digging and get to the bottom of this thing. So, yeah, this is your boy D Mac. I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. You know what I say: sticks and stones can break your bones, but the word can always heal you. I'm out.